Governor Blagojevich, thank you so much for joining me at Misunderstood. I'm so happy to be here in person with you.
Thank you for having me, Rachel. Hello.
Absolutely. Okay. So it's been a huge week in the news, and I have an expert here to go over it. So before we get into you, I thought I could ask you a few questions about your thoughts about what's happening. Is that okay?
Sure, of course.
Okay. So finally, we have the next Speaker of the House, the little-known lawmaker from Louisiana, Mike Johnson. He prevailed after a chaotic process that saw 3 other nominees fail to get the votes. Did they get it right this time?
Well, they've got a speaker. The question on whether or not they got it right remains to be seen.
Yeah.
Let's see what they do and how they approach it. But, you know, I spent 6 years in the U.S. Congress, and so I'm no stranger to those caucuses where you have to pick a leader. I want to confess to your audience that I actually supported Nancy Pelosi. Of that, I'll plead guilty. But he seems to be a guy that was able to build a consensus. Obviously, he did, necessary to be in the position that he's in. He's a supporter of President Trump, and President Trump supported him. And so if he's good enough for President Trump, then as far as I'm concerned, he's good enough for me.
Okay, interesting. Do you think Democrats can work with him, considering that he was against certifying the election?
I think Democrats will not want to work with him. They're going to be all about playing politics, which is what they've done since the Republicans took over the House in the last election. It's what they were all about when President Trump was president. So I would expect the Democrats to be just as much an obstacle as they have been before and to resist that. However, in a not very long period of time, they're going to have to come up with some sort of a budget or the government's going to shut down. So there will be an opportunity to try to find some common ground and ways to compromise to actually do things for the people.
Right.
But we'll have to see.
But so you personally, when you heard he was the guy, were you like, oh, this makes sense, I like him? I mean, do you have a personal thought on him? Had you heard of him before this time? I
had a little bit. I'm not that familiar with, a lot of the members of Congress today because, well, I was in exile for a while. But I have seen him on television, and I do know that he's been supportive of President Trump. And today, the Republican Party is going through a political realignment. It's changing from the old corporate country club Republican Party that really had no interest in looking after the little guy's interests to the party that Donald Trump is making it into, a party that's about a lot of different things, including concern for working people. And so Congressman Johnson, now Speaker Johnson, the fact that he is supportive of that agenda, to me, indicates that there's hope for this session of the United States Congress.
Right. Okay. I can appreciate that. Something else that happened this week. 4 Trump co-defendants have taken plea deals in Georgia. Who should Trump be worried will flip next?
Well, I'm no stranger to that, that dynamic and how those federal prosecutors who are weaponized and rotten and dirty and dishonest and corrupt when they use legal things and routine practices and turn them into criminal things for political purposes. They did that to me. They're doing it to President Trump. They've been doing it to President Trump for a very long time. It's unprecedented. So with the power that they have, and it's an uncontrolled power, there's no check and balance on these people. With the unlimited resources they have at their disposal, they have the ability, and they're very skilled at shaking people down for things they want them to say. And if they say the things they want them to say, they'll go easier on them. If they won't say the things they want them to say, they'll go harder on them. And those 4 that you're talking about, know that reality. I'm sure their lawyers were advising them along the way. And it becomes, unfortunately, a real test of loyalty when you find yourself in that position. And very few people have the backbone and the wherewithal to stand up to that kind of pressure and do what's right. So if you're asking me, am I surprised by those 4 particular people? I'm not. Sidney Powell she was a wild card from the very beginning. She was sort of out there on her own making crazy allegations that were not part of what the Trump people were doing. Jenna Ellis was like in over her head, very young and very fearful and afraid.
Scared, yeah.
She said certain things, and then as soon as the pressure was on, she immediately caved in Colorado to save her law license and admitted that she lied. And then when this happened, it didn't take her long to fold. So those don't surprise me. Mark Meadows, don't know enough about the details of that, but I'm not really surprised about that either. But I do believe that really none of them can really say anything, if they're being honest, that would be harmful from a legal point of view to President Trump. The things that Mark Meadows is going to say are basically very much similar to the stuff I've experienced. So what? It's legal. the President of the United States and any citizen of our country has a right to question whether or not an election was properly run or not. Mm-hmm. There's nothing criminal about that. And when the president goes to Washington and exercises his right to, as a citizen, to redress his grievances, and tens of thousands of people go there to do the same thing, in other words, march on City Hall, mm-hmm. This is supposed to be what we're supposed to do as citizens. Now, when some crazy people go off and do what they do and break laws, well, they're accountable and they should be held responsible for that. But there's no evidence that President Trump's incited anybody to do that, nor can Mark Meadows say that. So I'm not really that afraid of that. What I'm fearful of is just this constant assault against one man and his family and his livelihood and his business, because he's an agent of change who wants to make things better, change things in America, and frankly reorder the priorities of a place in Washington that's broken, that's really all about serving itself on the backs of the people. And this is why the establishment in both parties, mm-hmm. the Democrat establishment, of course, but also that country club Romney, Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, Bush Republican Party want to destroy him. And this is probably, I think, the most serious constitutional crisis our country's facing since the Civil War. The idea that you can use weaponized prosecutors to bring fake charges on things that aren't crimes and inject it into the political process at the highest level. We've never seen anything like this before. And I would argue it's among the many reasons why we have to pray and hope and vote that President Trump wins so that that stuff stops.
You mentioned Jenna Ellis. She seems to be the one so far that people are saying is the most damaging to Rudy Giuliani. If you were advising him, what would you say is his path for the future here?
Embrace the truth. Ride the truth, mm-hmm. no matter the consequences. And stand up to this and never give in. Now, I paid a heavy price for doing that and spent $2,800.
Right, I was going to say, even if that means jail time?
Yes, because the stakes are too high. And, when you're in this business like I was as the governor of Illinois, mm-hmm. when you've been as Rudy Giuliani has been, a former U.S. prosecutor himself, mayor of New York City, and a very successful mayor of New York City, and I would hope that the American people don't forget his service to our country after 9/11 because it was heroic. Mm-hmm. But when you sign up for those positions like I did, like he did, like President Trump, you have a higher duty, a higher responsibility than just to think about yourself or even your family, as hard as it is to say that. You have a duty to protect the Constitution. You swore in the Holy Bible to do so. Mm-hmm. And when these corrupt prosecutors are doing what they're doing, when they're weaponizing themselves and criminalizing things that are political and routine and really legal, and that's the operative phrase, legal, they're destroying our country. And so real leaders never give in to that. They stand up, and I would fully expect that Rudy Giuliani will do that. He'll be a real leader like he's always been. And, my heart goes out to him and what he's going through. But I have great admiration for his fortitude, and I'm very confident he's not going to give in. He's going to fight back, as he has been.
Yeah, it seems even today he made a statement that he is going to continue on the path of truth. So we will see where that goes. Michael Cohen was testifying this week in Trump's civil fraud trial. How credible do you think he was?
Not credible at all. He's a big liar. He's a sleazy, cowardly scumbag. I was in prison with guys like that, white-collar wimps like that Michael Cohen. Can I say this? That guy deserves a good old-fashioned Chicago neighborhood playground ass-kicking. Okay? Wow. He's a sycophantic guy who holds on to the coattails of a guy who's going up like Donald Trump, probably was an ass kisser every step of the way. And then as soon as there was trouble, he does what he does and flips against the guy and lies against the guy that frankly made him. It's sickening. And yet it's common. It's not uncommon. Human nature being what it is, there aren't a lot of guys that have the backbone of Trump, or frankly me. And so I have nothing but contempt for him, and I wouldn't believe a word he says, that he's already been found to have lied, and he changes his story all the time. And when people change their story, I think that tells you they can't get the truth right because they're not telling the truth.